Catch your gears in. Sweet. I mean, I'm just double checking for another guy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Friend, you getting anything? Back there. 1, 2, 3. Okay, sweet. Gary, you want me to go back out there? Because I noticed you were fiddling with the camera. Or you good? Sweet.
Yeah, I remember specifically when Walls was giving his first address after losing the presidential bid. You were there. Yep, I remember you.
See, I'm not even into that.
Because they wouldn't let us put our curses in. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah. Yeah, it's like you let people bring the big camera back in, but not the person. Yeah.
Like, I'm not even too scared of it.
Yeah,
That's my job. I'm like, Joe Thompson's an egg and then Abby's like, great work. And then I'm like, okay, cool, we call it a day. Really? Okay, wait, I'm glad that I can help for you at least. If not, like, any other. Yeah. Yeah. It's true, it's one of these super important, I guess. Why do you listen on my set? It's so I can't even read that. Yeah. No! I have glasses on and I cannot read that. That's so crazy. Are they reading her?
Yeah, because they
We think so crazy. That's cheeky. Scrappy, yeah. You're like 14. Wow, good. No, I know. You always can. I usually stack. Yeah, seriously. These two already popped up.
Yes, these are the two you need. Yeah, it's perfect.
Wait, yeah, that is good. Did you even take time off? Like, I don't even remember you not being here. Wait, that makes sense because you didn't. Okay, yeah, you would have totally been all over that.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Good morning. My name is Joe Thompson. I'm the acting United States Attorney for the District of Minnesota. We're here to announce the first round of indictments in the ongoing investigation of fraud in the Housing Stabilization Services State Medicaid program. The HSS program is riddled with fraud. The story has become all too familiar. Minnesota started the Housing Stabilization Services program in 2020. We were the first state in the nation to make this Medicaid benefit available. At the time, the program was estimated to cost approximately $2.6 million a year, but it quickly exploded. It grew to more than $100 million a year in Medicaid billing within just a few years. Hundreds of companies enrolled in the program and began claiming to provide housing stabilization services to thousands of clients throughout the state of Minnesota. Many of these companies operated out of dilapidated storefronts or rundown office buildings that were full of other fraudulent healthcare companies, such as the Griggs Midway building in St. Paul. Rather than being general healthcare or social services providers, many of these companies were devoted exclusively to billing the Housing Stabilization Program. Today we are charging 8 defendants for their role in this fraud scheme. 4 defendants, Mokhtar Hassan Aden, Mustafa Ali, Khalid Daib, and Abdi Fattah Mohammed, are charged for their role in carrying out a fraud in a company called Brilliant Minds Services, LLC, which is a housing stabilization services company run out of the Griggs Midway building in St. Paul. Brilliant Minds and its owners received more than $2 million in Medicaid billings based on their fraudulent claims to be providing housing stabilization services. Defendants Christopher and Emmanuel Falade are being charged for their role in operating another fraudulent housing stabilization company called Falade Care. Together, they received more than $2 million in Medicaid billing, purportedly for providing housing stabilization services. 2 additional defendants are being charged by information today. Assad Ahmed Adaw, the owner of Leo Human Services, is being charged for his role in the scheme. His company received more than $2.7 million in housing stabilization services payments. His brother, Anwar Ahmed Adaw, the owner of Liberty Plus LLC, is also being charged here by information. He and his company received more than $1 million in Medicaid payments for fraudulent housing stabilization services claims. All of these defendants and the others that we are investigating followed a similar scheme. They identified vulnerable individuals, Medicaid eligible individuals, many of whom were being released from drug or alcohol rehab facilities. They signed them up to receive housing stabilization services to help them, purportedly to help them find stable housing. And then they billed them for services that they did not, or they billed Medicaid for services they did not actually provide. Despite the hundreds of millions of dollars in payments that have gone out from the state of Minnesota to housing stabilization services companies, most of these individuals did not receive the stable housing they so desperately needed. The money was just simply stolen. Now, this is just the first round of indictments in this case. Unlike in similar cases, such as Feeding Our Future, we're going to charge this case in waves as we develop the evidence for individual defendants and companies. The plan is to charge groups of defendants and companies as their cases are ready for indictment. This investigation is ongoing, and it's being conducted by agents from the FBI, Health and Human Services, OIG, and the IRS, along with the assistance of many other law enforcement agencies, including the Postal Inspection Service and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. As I said, the investigation is ongoing, and we expect additional charges to be brought in the coming weeks and months. Now, before I open it up for questions, let me just say this. As many of you know, Minnesota is drowning in fraud. many of the owners of housing stabilization services companies had one or more other companies through which they build other Medicaid programs, such as the EIDBI autism program, the ARMS, or the Adult Rehabilitative Mental Health Services program, the ICS Integrated Community Support Program, the Community Access for Disability Inclusion, or CADI program, PCA services, and other Medicaid waivered services. The level of fraud in these programs is staggering. Unfortunately, our system of trust but verify no longer works. These programs have been abused over and over to the point where the fraud has overtaken the legitimate services. I've been prosecuting these cases for years, and I've literally run out of ways to express what is happening in our state and in our state programs, and to explain the coming iceberg I see as we reckon with the fraud. Now, we can and will prosecute many of these individuals, as we have been, but we cannot prosecute our way out of this problem. We must do more at the front end to stop the outflow of money. Everyone needs to pick up a shovel. The agents and prosecutors in this room have been doing extraordinary work to investigate and prosecute these cases. The reporters in this room have been asking the right questions and doing their own investigative reporting to identify fraudulent companies and schemes. And if there's a hopeful note, the state and its politicians are starting to take notice about the problem. It's time for everyone to speak up and stand up to confront the problem in the state before it is too late. I'll now take questions.
Joe, are you looking into anybody at the state who was supposed to be keeping an eye on this and keeping an eye out for fraud, for potential criminal activity? What was going on at the state level here that allowed this to happen?
Well, we're certainly looking into why this is happening for sure. I can't say who we're investigating.
Mr. Thompson, yesterday the IG at DHS mentioned this crossover of different programs, and you just talked about it today. My question is, how often are you seeing that, and is it against the law to be sort of double dipping in multiple programs, or is it just one big red flag?
It's not against the law. We see it in almost every case. It's a huge red flag, especially when it's these waivered programs and they're extraordinarily large billing into individual programs without having a comprehensive health care or social services practice.
Was there anything at the state that signaled to people at DHS that, oh, this person is also in this program?
I don't know, but they certainly have the data, so they can tell.
Are they notifying your office when they see these red flags, or are you guys investigating this separately?
We do our best to communicate with the state, but most of our investigations are generated internally and organically.
You're talking about waves of indictments. Do you have any sense of the overall scope of the schemes that you're looking at here?
The scheme is massive. The number of people we're looking at is a very large number. What it'll end up being is hard to say. We're just going to take it one wave at a time.
Can you explain where the Medicaid dollars funding this HSS or HHS program come from? The tax dollars?
Well, I'm not an expert on how Medicaid works. I mean, a lot of it's federal money. There's state money too. It obviously flows through the state.
Have you heard from Governor Walz or Attorney General Ellison with respect to your work on this case in particular?
Certainly, I know the governor's office has reached out about this case, yes. And obviously, they've shut down the program in light of the investigation.
So can you talk about what kind of safeguards could have been implemented on the front end of this? What would better guardrails look like?
Well, without being comprehensive, obviously there's red flags, including people billing multiple programs. I think certainly things can be put in place to ensure that the people that are billing have individual provider numbers. They're providing information about when they're providing the services, including time, so you can see whether people are billing for providing multiple services at the same time in a way that's literally impossible. I think disclosures about different companies that people own and ownership interests in different companies, so that people have one housing stabilization services company and one, say, autism clinic, the state would want to know that. It's, there's only so many hours in a day. How many companies can you, especially if they're different locations, how many companies can you legitimately operate?
What kind of overlap have you seen, if any, with Feeding Our Future that you could talk about?
Significant. I think it's fair to say that most of these healthcare fraud investigations, including the autism one and this one, essentially grew out of the Feeding Our Future investigations, through which we saw bank records routinely where people were purporting to serve meals to thousands of kids a day, and they're also purporting to run an autism clinic or a PCA services program or home health care. And so we just went down that rabbit hole of looking at bank records and looking into these individual companies.
But none of these defendants in this case here were involved in Feeding Our Future
No.
at this point, based on what you've charged?
Not these 8 defendants, no.
I know you're focused on HSS today. Can you bring us up to speed on where you stand on the autism investigations?
Yeah, we expect charges to come down, the first wave of charges, in short order here.
And also, DHS said they have 1,000 open investigations. Are you satisfied with when your office is notified of an investigation or possible fraud?
I think we can always do better to collaborate and communicate about potential fraud. I think that's true. There's a difference in terms of they're regulators and we're prosecutors and investigators, so we have different goals and different ability in terms of the amount of cases that we can process. You can regulate things, a lot of people at the same time. You can only prosecute so many.
Do you have a preliminary assessment of how much money may have been stolen in this current case, and a sense of how it may compare with the figure you came up with in Feeding Our Future?
Well, these 8 defendants charged something in the order of stole something in the order of $10 million. Each individual housing stabilization company is smaller than a lot of the Feeding Our Future. That's just the nature of the program. Some programs allow for larger amounts of billing than others. Say the autism program, for example, the billing can get quite high very quickly. Housing stabilization, less so. No less fraudulent, though.
What's your estimate of the total loss with housing stabilization?
We're up to over $100 million a year in the program, and most of it's fraud, as far as I can tell.
You mentioned a coming iceberg. What did you mean?
As we keep digging, and I know there's a hearing yesterday, into different programs, you see more and more of them that are riddled with fraud. At some point, that's just an unsustainable system.
You said that they identified vulnerable individuals. What could those individuals have done? What could the public do better than scream that they're not being?
It's a good question. That most of the people that were looking for housing stabilization services were people who did not have stable housing. Many of them were getting out of drug or alcohol rehab facilities. They were vulnerable. They were coming from a vulnerable place, trying to find a stable place to live, maybe trying to find a job. And when someone for example, at a rehab facility hands them a business card or a flyer for a company, and they reach out, I don't know what they can do. It really is taking advantage of vulnerable communities, and these are services that presumably some people need. They need some services anyway.
Most of these, if not all of these areas where you're investigating fraud are relatively new Medicaid programs and services. Are you seeing anything on this scale at all within the more mature Medicaid services?
Well, these waivered services programs that the state opts into are experimental programs by their nature. They're supposed to be revenue neutral, so you are providing services here in a way that reduces overall billing in other areas. For example, if someone doesn't have stable housing, that causes other negative health consequences or outcomes, and by helping them find a home at the front end, you might save money. You pay a little bit up front, you save money in the back end. Obviously, some of these programs weren't well thought through when we jumped into them. And this is one where the state was the very first state in the country to offer this program, and probably questionable that we ought to be doing that in light of the problem.
It seems fairly organized, Joe. Are you looking at possible racketeering charges?
Probably not. I mean, we could. RICO charges, there's positive and negatives to them. They're not the most nimble, so there's certain cases where they're quite useful, especially when there's a lot of assets to be seized, or when you want to send a message, for example, in the gang context. I don't know whether that applies here. Obviously, we'll look into it, whether it's appropriate.
Have you been able to recover any resources that we know you serve at raids and search warrants?
Ongoing. I know we seized some cash during one of the searches, a significant amount, but yes, we're always looking for assets.
This obviously has gotten a lot of press over the summer. Have defendants, either these or ones you are also looking at, has anyone fled the area, fled the country? That they obviously know what's coming.
Not as far as I'm aware of at this point. One of the defendants that we is surrendering today was actually in Maine. I think he was living there though, or just maybe traveling, but he's flying back after receiving word of the indictment through his attorney today.
Other
Can you
people
explain
you're
the
looking
difference?
into?
Can you explain the difference? You said you're charging some and then you're charging some by information. Just
Yeah, so normally when we charge someone with a felony in federal court, you have to go to the grand jury, and the grand jury returns an indictment or doesn't return an indictment, but we have to present evidence to the grand jury to obtain an indictment. And information is a situation where the defendant, usually through counsel, agrees to waive the right to an indictment and just be charged by an information.
And is it safe to say the two being charged by information, they're cooperating and helping the government?
I can't say that. Obviously, most people that plead to information or that go by information plead guilty shortly thereafter, and that's what I expect to happen here.
Are the people you're looking into, are they U.S. citizens?
I believe so, yes.
You can't help but miss the fact that the vast majority of defendants in the Feeding Our Future case are Somali naturalized citizens or immigrants. And I wonder if the cast of characters in this case is similar.
I think of the 8, I don't know for sure, but I think 6 of the 8 in this case are East African, of East African descent.
I know with Feeding Our Future there was a lot of money stashed overseas that you're not able to get at. Is that the case here without stabilization too?
I believe one of the defendants in this case had purchased some real estate in Kenya, but not to the extent we saw in some of the Feeding Our Future indictments, not all. Some of them had significant ties abroad and others less so.
purchased with proceeds from the fraud, you believe?
Yes.
Do you have enough resources to handle all of the? I mean, we're talking about 1,000 DHS investigations. I don't know how many you're looking at, but are you bringing in extra resources to handle all that?
We're just working extra hard. No, I mean, we don't have enough to charge everyone. We can't prosecute our way out of this problem. These cases are resource intensive, obviously. We have a small team. It's a dedicated team. It's an impressive team of talented investigators, agents, and lawyers, prosecutors that have been working on this case. And we've been developing our skills over the years, starting with Feeding Our Future and other cases. And so I think the team is good at what it does, as you've seen with these cases, but can we charge everyone? No.
So when you take a look at the broader nature of Medicaid fraud, which has been a long-standing problem throughout the country, are there characteristics about this case or these cases that you're working on that make them unique and different to the broader umbrella of Medicaid fraud?
You mean nationally versus in Minnesota?
Yes.
I think Minnesota has seen systematic attacks on its state government's programs. You mentioned the question was, do we have enough resources? If everyone enrolls a company in, say, the Housing Stabilization Services, it's not just 10 or 20, but literally hundreds of them, and they all enroll essentially at the same time shortly after the program is started and start billing in a fraudulent way, it just overwhelms the system. And we've seen that in program after program after program. And certainly in Minnesota, I think we're unique in that way. And it has, in my mind, and what I've seen, been a systematic and wholesale attack on our state government programs in a way that has overwhelmed the system in many ways. And when I talk about the coming iceberg, what I mean is it really has called into question everything that we're doing with these programs. The programs aren't designed to have hundreds or even thousands of bad actors all commit fraud, try to defraud them from day one. And again, most of these cases, unlike a lot of Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud cases nationally, these aren't just overbilling or upcoding, as they call it, billing for a service that's a higher reimbursement rate than you actually provided. These are often just purely fictitious companies solely created to defraud the system. And that's unique in the extent to which we have that here in Minnesota, and program after program after program, I think is unique, and that's the problem that we're all grappling with here in Minnesota in recent years.
Are you saying fraud is the business model?
Correct. In so many of these waivered services programs, they're essentially just fraud programs.
Why do you think Minnesota has seen those systematic attacks?
I don't know. I don't know.
Is it worse here in
Yes, I think we have a worse problem. I mean, I talked to counterparts in much larger districts. I was talking to a former colleague who's at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Florida, Miami, which is a place with colorful crime in many different areas, including fraud. And they were expressing how we have bigger fraud cases regularly than they do down in Miami at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And that's one of the premier and the largest U.S. Attorney's offices in the country that has prosecuted all manner of national and international fraud in other cases. So no, I think I used to be at the office in Chicago, which does lots of large-scale cases throughout the whole gamut of crimes you have, but the fraud we have here just doesn't compare to those places. It's incredible.
Are you bringing in other local law enforcement at all, or the AG's office, because of a resource issue?
We're doing what we can. We have someone from the BCA here standing up here with us. They're helping. The Attorney General has a Medicare fraud control unit, and they're able to prosecute cases at the state level. So we're leveraging all the resources we can, and we're trying to be creative in our investigations and our prosecutions, which has shown an effect. But there's only so many hours in the day, and I could probably keep 1,000 prosecutors busy here with fraud cases, and we have like 25, and only 5 of them do fraud cases.
Has the Minnesota Fraud Hotline aided in any of these investigations? Are people coming forward with information in that way?
I don't know what that is. So no. People call us, and people have stuff they should tell us, or the FBI. We rely on tips. That's how we find cases, and sometimes it's through reporting, like AJ here, and many others in this room. Sometimes it's people just picking up the phone and calling us. Sometimes it's from the state or local law enforcement. And a lot of them are just generated from our other cases. We just spin off from one investigation to the other. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. Really appreciate it. This is probably mine from last time.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. We are going to bring in, everybody gets a packet. In the packet is the press release, the 2 indictments, and don't record me, and the 2